from beautiful East Tennessee in the foothills of the Smoky Mountains. You are listening to the Sherry Voluntary Show, and I do appreciate you being with me today and spending your time here. If you're not familiar with my guest, which I imagine a lot of you are, you soon will be because Mr. Antony Sammeroff is pretty unforgettable. He
It's
is,
true.
that is true. He's the host of the Scottish Libertarian podcast, and he has written several books, including Procrastination Annihilation, How to Be Yourself and Love It, right? Or Be Yourself and Loving
Yeah,
It.
that's more my brand, Sherry. BeYourselfAndLoveIt.com.
Yes.
Uh, and if you want the Procrastination Annihilation book, you just type /do it after that. But
That's do it for all you
yeah, do it.
Americans.
Yeah,
Do it.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But now Antony, and he's been on a million podcasts. Do you know how many podcast appearances you've made just in your total lifetime?
740 million.
Yeah. Yeah. You get around. So,
What are you suggesting? That's two songs, both written about me. First of all, Unforgettable by Nat King Cole, and secondly, I Get Around by the Beach Boys.
yes, there you go. And
Yep.
that's, I was going to also mention that you are quite a talented musician.
I don't know how talent. Some people say I'm multi-talented. I just say multi, as in I can play a lot of different things. Not necessarily that well, but I get by.
You're trans-talented. Is that, is that,
Trans.
a, is
All
that a
right.
word?
Okay. Yeah, I wanted to be um, a I don't know. I was going to say that I transferred my talent from one thing to another, but
Yeah.
words failed me. I really hope that your audience knows me, Sherry, because this is like the weirdest podcast intro ever. Like, I've just been so cocky and like familiar
Yeah.
that I really hope these people know me. Otherwise, they might get the wrong. Well, they might get the right impression. Now they know the real me.
Yes.
The
Yes.
the the
I
deplore.
yes, he's not being overly familiar. Anthony is a dear friend of mine, so just so y'all
Very
know.
dear.
Yes. And you you have like I can't wait to hear your new hit single, Make That
All
Money.
right.
But
Money, yeah.
yeah. No, you were
Yeah, people don't know that I'm a gangster rapper.
like Sans Gangster, but yeah. You were also a playwright, or you've I know
Yeah,
you review plays.
I, I wrote plays when I was in college, and I had a couple of them put on at the college, which was really awesome. It's something that I'm thinking of maybe returning to in the next few years. I want to kind of write a play that basically advocates for libertarianism, but not kind of like an Ayn Rand thing, which is very driven by the political
Mm,
element. The political element's going to be there, but I want it to be driven by characters, by the character interests and the character. I've got a plot line for it, but if anyone out there is a libertarian creative and a good writer and they think that's the kind of thing they like to collaborate on, I'm more of a team player, so you should get in touch with me if you think that that kind of thing is something you might be interested in.
yeah, there are a lot of talented people out there, and I think about say Dune or um, Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, or there's so many books by libertarians who have very libertarian themes in them, but they're
Right.
not Stranger in a Strange Land. That's the one I was trying to remember. But
Yeah.
they don't come at you and say this is libertarianism. So I think that's a great way to go. And so that's what we're going to talk a little bit about today is universal basic income for and against, which is your new book.
Mm.
And
Yeah, the
I,
new book.
yes, and I found the style very similar. It's not, I mean, it's an economics treatise, if you want. It's about a serious subject, a subject that a lot of people, the dismal science, all that. But it's very conversational, which is what I like
Thank you.
about your style. And it's not inapproachable to the layman because I'm not economically illiterate, but I'm not, some great economist. And I don't sit around reading economics all day. That's not my
Right.
deal, not my jam. So I thought this book was really great and really
Thank you.
approachable. And I know that you have a point of view about it,
Mm.
but it wasn't condescending to people of the other point of view.
Thank you. Those are all great compliments. Thank you, Sherry. Yes, this is a book um, that's written for you for to equip libertarians to deal with left-wing arguments in favor of the universal basic income, or indeed right-wing arguments. I mean, we know Charles Murray wrote a book in favor of the UBI, and there's some libertarians that favor it, but not just that. More important, that's the secondary function. I know those are the first people that are going to read it, people in the libertarian community. This is a book written to the left, much like Beyonce's song, to the left, to the left.
If we have
And
socialism,
yeah,
communism, everything we own will fit in a box to the left.
all right, got it. So this is the book, in my opinion, if I could be so bold to talk it up, to send your left-wing friends to introduce them to libertarian approaches for relieving poverty, actually. Because as libertarians, we don't talk about that as much as the left do, and they've always got their talking points, and their talking points are, what about the poor? What about the less well off? The disadvantaged? Again and again, they beat that drum, and they win, and they win, and they win, and they win, because that's what people care about. If you libertarians had your way, the poor would be starving in the street.
Right.
So even though this is a book which begins on the universal income, basic income, it's kind of a Trojan horse. It's a bait and switch. It starts by saying, here are the arguments in favor of the UBI, here are the arguments against, culminating in saying, well, as it stands, it's too expensive. It's not affordable to introduce a UBI right now. So, if you're for it, here are a bunch of policies which would bring down the cost of living and make the UBI affordable. And if you're against it, the same policies are necessary for you to take forth and say, hey, here are a bunch of ways we could bring the cost of living down by using less coercion, by using the state less government. Less government, more welfare. And I don't mean welfare as in welfare payments. I mean welfare as the welfare of the general population. So I go through a few different things where central banking, housing, free trade and regulations, all sorts of stuff, all sorts of good stuff. It's got lots of facts and figures that by the way, I should add, you can get a free PDF of it by going to beyourselfandloveit.com/UBI. So please download it and send it to your left-wing friends. There's great copy and paste material in there as well, but I demonstrate systematically how the state drives up the cost of living and makes it harder for people of few means to get by.
Okay.
And I think it was a necessary addition to the libertarian canon, in my opinion. I was going to say in my humble opinion, but come on, guys, you know who you're dealing with here, right?
Yeah.
I won't insult your intelligence by saying my humble opinion.
Well, I think that you're right that that is the approach that's needed, because I think the left and right, to use that paradigm, they talk past each other a lot, because our ideals don't matter if we can't get the other side to listen. And
Right.
that's often what happens. Is it's not that those people are evil. They have a different foundational concern than we do.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah, it's I love that book, The Righteous Mind by Jonathan Haidt, and I recommend it to everyone because I've read it probably 3 or 4 times, and it reinforces the fact that we're not evil, right? People aren't
Yeah.
evil on the left, and people who want to take our money and steal it from us, they don't look at it that way. Their general foundational concerns are just different than ours. And yes, we see things from our point of view, and we can both be right in some ways, because I think a lot of times compassion, or at least I think libertarians are very compassionate people. I think they're compassionate, but they're also very logical people in general
Mm-hmm.
and very facts oriented, and that doesn't often translate well to the left. So I
Mm.
think that this kind of approach is not only teaching us about UBI, but your approach is teaching us maybe how to speak to the left.
Oh well, that's a huge compliment. And the old saying goes, people don't care what you know until they know that you care.
Yeah.
And what I tried to do with this book was put myself in the place of someone who's reading this, who's on the left and is for the UBI because they don't want anyone to be poor, they want everyone's needs to be met, and so forth. And I'll say, well, you know, it's written in a way that's kind of like demonstrates, well, I share your concern. Here are some things you might have not thought of.
Right.
Imagine, and here, imagine that the rent of your apartment or your mortgage costs half what it costs now. Imagine everyone's dead. That would not only mean that everyone was richer, but it would be cheaper for the same amount of money. We'd be able to provide twice as much housing to needy people because the cost of doing that's half. That makes sense. Someone can read that, even if they're not converted, even if they don't become an overnight libertarian. Hopefully it gives them a push in the right direction and shows them various ways where liberty can help them achieve their values.
Exactly. And I think that's a brilliant way to put it because we are concerned with the justice of the individual, whereas a lot of times people are on the left are concerned with the justice of society. And so
Mm,
both of those things can be accomplished. It's just a matter
mm,
of us all being able to talk it out. And I always tell people, you don't have to come all the way to my point of view,
sure.
right? But if we can agree that we're not going to force each other to do things that we don't want to do, I think that's the best place we can all come
Hmm.
to and then
Hmm.
say, you want to do this or that, go right ahead. You don't have the right to force me. And I think that's for me the foundational bottom line that is the starting point. And that's where I feel like a lot of libertarians get frustrated with the left because they want to often use government, which
Yeah,
is a proxy
yeah.
force, against us.
I mean, yeah, basically they want to use the force of the state to impose their utopia upon everyone. But of course, they don't see it that way. They
Right.
see us as imposing they see capitalism as a system which is essentially soul destroying, in which your only role is to create something that other people can produce so that you can produce something that did I get that wrong? So you can create something that other people can consume
Yes.
so that you can consume something that other people can produce.
Yeah.
That's what, and they see that as soul destroying, and you have to understand that. Now, when you're talking to the left, I have a conspiracy theory. I don't like the state, well, it's not really, the state requires the poor. The poor don't require the state,
Yes.
right? Because what would happen if the people at the bottom were were wealthier? Well, the first thing they would do is they'd take their kids out of public school and put them in the best private schools they could send them to. So that means we need less public schools. So there's less role for the state, and less people say, well, how will you get education without the state? The second thing they'll do is get private health insurance, especially here
Yes.
in the UK where we have socialised healthcare. They say, well, you know what, those NHS hospitals, they're not that great. They've got long waiting lists. We better get life insurance. Okay, so the need for the state to provide healthcare shrinks. That's less role for the state. How do you recruit poor people to put them in the army, to send them abroad? So you need a humbler foreign policy when less people are poor, and so on and so forth. So one could say that it's in the interest of the state to push up the provision of services or to waste money. In this country, there's all of these college courses which are funded by the government. It's not college as in, it would be more like in the US you call it community college. It's like the kind of college you go to before college. We call what you call college university.
Sure.
So college is like here is like a bridge between school. For people who didn't do as well enough at school to go to university, they go to college first.
Or just you
And
don't have the finances for
yeah,
university.
well, well, in Scotland you can even do your undergrad for free. So
Right.
but what's happened as a consequence of that is the consequence of the standard of the education comes down. Now, there's so many of these college courses here which are just make time work. They put people through them for 1 or 2 years at considerable public expense. Lots of the kids, they're not really kids, they're in their late teens, don't turn up to many classes. Some of them get bursaries, they get free money from the government if they're from lower working class homes, and they can just spend all that on alcohol or drugs. There's no monitoring of what they spend it on. And it's like, from the outside perspective, you go, what are you guys doing? Like, why are you spending this money so poorly? From the view of my conspiracy theory, it's not illogical at all. It makes perfect sense. They have to do something. They have to waste public funds. And in this country, the average person works 20 to 25 years to pay their taxes, as I mention
Well,
in the book. So this is so you could say that there's some Machiavellians planning this stuff out. That's not really necessary because every system tends in the direction that the incentive structures within that system create. So if you've got a system that's incentivized to waste money, lo and behold, that
right.
system is very likely to waste money. Even if there's really good, honest people working in that system
Right.
to try and push back the tide. Well, I mean, King Canute couldn't do it, so I doubt a public sector worker with the best intentions is going to be able to um, swim against the tide.
Yeah.
So
It's just
yeah,
the nature of the state, the nature of any powerful organization like that tends towards that kind of, um, give me, I'll give you something so that you need me. And
hmm
people, I think after so long, people just don't see other alternatives. And if you go, well, I got my degree for free, then you feel indebted to that, which
right,
you could have had other options. I know
sure,
even in Tennessee now, which is a very, very generally conservative state, they vote Republican here all the
right,
time. And we have 2 free years of college now.
right.
It's
Wow.
so, yeah, and that's a big deal. It does
Uh,
affect us.
And see, when you're receiving something for free, you don't advocate for yourself. If it's a shitty course, oh well, it's just a crap course.
Right.
Whereas if you're paying money, you're like, what the hell? I'm paying for this. Why are you palming us off with this terrible course? Some of my courses in community colleges were just time to waste. One in particular, they could have taught the whole lecture series in 3 lectures for a whole semester. So it's not. It's like once you have these systems in place where people got a free degree that's not demanded by the market, what are they going to do apart from teach?
Right.
So there's not enough positions for professors for the amount of people who've come through the free education system because they can't get a job in the free market, so they want to go into the university. Well, there's not enough university. Well, one way to solve that is to give free education, and there's more and more people in the university. Then there's more and more places for people who've gone through these courses, because the way that I see education is, if it's going to improve your value as a individual, as a worker, sorry, to use the Marxist term, as an employee, your employer will fund your education because that's training, that's on the job training. They'll send you for an education if it's going. Why? Because the more qualified you are, the more money you make your employer.
Yeah.
So if it's got a practical value in the marketplace, employers will pay for it.
Yeah.
If it's not got a practical market value, well, then it's a hobby. And frankly, however fun the pursuit of your hobbies is, it's immoral to force other people at gunpoint who are working to pay for you to pursue your hobbies.
True.
So all of these I mean, we here, and there's at least one university in Britain that does a undergraduate degree in the Beatles. So, great.
Very
If you love
worthwhile.
the Beatles, I know, go study the Beatles. Why the hell not? But don't do it on my dime
Right.
or
Yeah.
10 pence a piece.
Yeah, that's the point. A lot of times we're not talking about need. We're talking
Hmm.
about what people perceive as a need in their lives. And, if you can make education a need, well, people need water. You can make that a need. They need to pay your water bill. And I mean, you can make everything basically a need because even entertainment is a need. So,
Well, we've run out of needs.
yeah, exactly.
We need to make ones up.
Um, but I had that experience in my own life where I used to work for a chain we have here called Walgreens. It's a drugstore. And I worked in their photo processing area. And I would always, every time there was, someone was out, I would take that shift. So I learned to work all over the store in different departments. And I started filling in the pharmacy as their cashier, but they liked me so much, they paid for me to go get trained and become a certified pharmacy technician.
Ooh.
So yeah, I mean, I made more money. It was a good just my own work ethic of wanting to make extra money got me into a better position. But the company was more than willing to do that for me because they
Mm.
wanted to keep their talent. I'm not
Yeah.
that talented, but um,
Oh, come on. You're too modest.
it's
Give it up, Sherry. Give it
yeah.
up. I know you.
A good work ethic goes a long way, I think, and a good smile. So, I've seen that happen where companies will, and not just in my own life, other people have had that happen where they want to do something and the company wants to keep them, so they'll retrain them to do something else. And I think you make that point in your book is sort of a similar point that one of the things people have said about universal basic income is that it is a basic income, right?
Mhm.
And so a lot of people would continue to work because they want to live better than they
Mhm.
could on that amount of money. Um, and it gives them more options as to the work they do. But I think the point that you make, which is really, really good in that, is that there's a difference in the quality of the jobs that people would take. And when I say quality, I mean as in, who's going to go dig ditches when they can do something else or clean sewers, whatever it is. These are functions that are necessary for
Mhm.
society to have. And you disincentivize people from doing those jobs because they don't have to. They can
Yeah.
rely on that basic and do whatever else they want. They can pursue other interests, which is not necessarily a bad thing. But when you're doing that, it's you mention it in the forward to, or in your introduction to your book, is Bastiat's The Seen and the Unseen, basically. That there are always unintended consequences when we start mucking around with the economy and every other government program, that there's things that we can know and then there's things that we can't know. And that's it's just true universally about just about everything.
Yeah, and I tried to several times through the book demonstrate a logic tree of the consequences of policies. Well, if you introduce this policy, it might seem good for this reason, but then if you consider this and then you could add that this, but in that case, this and this. And the purpose of that is twofold. One is just because my mind works in the way that when I understand something, I don't like these articles that I find where someone tackles an issue and they make one or two arguments, or maybe three if you're lucky, and then they don't perceive that someone reading that is going to read that article and read those arguments and go, yeah, but, yeah, but.
Right.
And I try and preempt as many yeah buts as I can. So the primary purpose of that is to give a person a well-rounded view of an issue. So they don't just understand it from one angle, but they understand it from many angles. And from my perspective, it's like IKEA furniture or something like that. I have a model of the world in my head, which I've built up over 10 years on economics. And when I understand an issue, it's like that. It's like a piece of IKEA furniture, but I have to flat pack it so that you can take it out of the box and rebuild that model in your own head.
Yes.
Because ideas work like a cobweb, but we communicate linearly, sentence by sentence. So we have to go, it's this thing, this, then this, then this, then this, then this. That's how we communicate. But how our mind builds a model of things is not linear, it's holistic. So my goal in my writing and my articles in general is to take something that's actually cobweb-like and flat pack it so you can rebuild it in your own mind. So that's the primary purpose. The secondary purpose, and this is a little bit more pretentious, if I may say so, is to teach people how economics is done, to teach people to think economically. Because I think if they see it done regarding a few things, they'll be able to apply the principles to many things. Now, most of the people listening to this, if you're a libertarian, chances are you're pretty up on your economics. I don't think that means it won't be a beneficial or an educational read for you. I think you'll still get quite a lot out of it. But it's especially awesome if you will send the free version, which you can get at beyourselfandloveit.com/UBI, to people who aren't coming from our point of view. It won't just school them on this issue. They got schooled. That's not what, they got schooled on this issue. But it will help them to think economically in general.
Yeah, I think you do mention that, and as well, that most people don't understand how money works, and I think I've seen that. Like, most people don't realize that they live economics every day. Like, we can't get away from it, but we have very little understanding of it. And I think that's sort of by design of the public school system as well, because it doesn't benefit the state to have people who are economically literate on either side, because that doesn't make our core foundations go away. I mean, Milton Friedman, as you know, he was for the negative income tax, and which is a similar situation for UBI.
It's a different version of the UBI.
Right. And so, and he's very much someone that's respected by the right and many people on the left. He was in many ways, he was from the Chicago school, which is different than, what you and I would necessarily espouse, but some great understanding of economics. And
yes,
I think in that way, to get to my next question, I have seen universal basic income as sort of, for myself, maybe a stopgap measure, because I want to end the welfare state. I want to end the state. And I don't want people who have been the victims of the state to be more victimized by the ending of that system, because they've been incentivized. They're not evil people because they're on welfare. They've been incentivized. And many times in communities that the whole reason they're poor and that they're not doing very well economically is because of state intervention that was unintended or unseen consequences, or people just didn't care about them. And so I look at UBI as maybe a possible way to step down out of the welfare state. I don't know what your opinion is on that. I'd love to
Well,
hear.
we're gonna have we're gonna have to take it outside, Sherry. I hope you've got boxing gloves.
I don't, but I could get some.
You're not a dirty fighter, are you, Sherry?
Of course I am. What, are you kidding me? I fight to win, buddy.
Okay. Okay, well, no one really fights to lose, do they? So that's good. I have. I have. What?
I was going to say, I don't know that position is right. That's why, or is the best. There's probably a better transitionary.
I have
model.
Reservations at a restaurant tonight. Would you like to come and join me? No. I have reservations about that point of view. Severe reservations. because I think rather than wean people off the state, the UBI now becomes an like you can live outside of the state to a degree now. You know, you can trade
Right.
goods illegally, you can sell things in Bitcoin, you
Agorist.
can, yeah, there's all sorts of ways to dodge the state. Um, Once you institute a UBI, the state, I should have put this argument in the book, I never thought to do it. Maybe for the print copy, I've got to remember this. I do intend to add a couple of things for the print copy.
Cool.
The state becomes all-pervasive. It's a big umbrella that everyone's now involved in. Everyone in the whole country, apart from a few people who maybe on principle don't pick it up, are now receiving a check from the state.
Right.
So that's the grievous concern I have about that.
Right. Yeah,
It's
once you
like,
give them power, it's hard to get it back, isn't
right,
it?
yes, and it's not going to wean, in my opinion, it's never going to wean anyone off anything. And the reason why is, apart from the fact that now every government's got, oh, well, raise the UBI by this much, vote for us. The second thing is, even if you got rid of the bureaucracy of the welfare state, the next thing that happens is, oh, but I'm a single mom, I should have a higher UBI. Oh, but I'm old. Oh, but I live in an expensive part of the city. Oh, but I'm disabled. And on the face of it, everyone goes, well, you know, why not? Why, we should give those people who are at disadvantage a higher UBI than everyone else. And then you're back to means testing, and then you're back to the big bureaucratic system. As Milton Friedman said, there's nothing so permanent as a temporary government program.
Yeah.
And my concern would be, as with all the goodwill in the world, it's going to be UBI and. It's not going to be UBI instead of. Even if it was UBI instead of, there's other things that concern me about it. One is, well, I mean, so many people are now dependent on the government for a check that can be weaponized, that can be totalitarian. Well, if you don't like, well, we'll just take away their UBI. Oh, they committed a crime, take away their UBI. Oh, they've got these political views, we should dock their UBI because they said something that they shouldn't have said on television. And the other one's more of an economic concern. Now, I don't know if I'm correct about this, but my suspicion is that you give people out a UBI, you give them a check into their bank account, the first thing, people will just start trading in Bitcoin or euros, or because why? Because no one worked for the money, so the money doesn't have the value of labor behind it. And people go, well, why should I? This money's flying around everywhere. This free money's flying around everywhere. It's not worth anything. Like, I think I'm going to accept. The currency could collapse because it's not backed by people's labor anymore.
That's one of the things that I explain to my kids and other even adults that I've heard say, well, we just need to get rid of money. And I would say, well, money is a representation, right?
Yeah,
Money is the representation of someone's labor. So it makes life simpler because it's easier to figure out what cost is and the value of things when I don't have to take 5 chickens and try and trade them for the lumber I need to build, my house, and figure out if that's equitable or not. It's easier to set prices. It's easier to carry from one place to another, all of these things. And so I think people have a very, very naive view of money and that it's somehow evil. And maybe that comes from a misunderstanding of the, Judeo-Christian societies we live in where, that people often say money is the root of all evil, but we know it's the love of money, and that's
Right.
a whole other issue and argument you can have on a spiritual basis. But money is not a bad thing, and I think people do their kids a disservice and themselves by not understanding at least the basics of how money operates. I don't know if you're familiar with the book Rich Dad, Poor Dad.
Yes, I love that book.
Yeah, it's a great book. I read it a long time ago, and it just gave you such a great understanding as to why people who understand money tend to succeed, because they understand money and they understand how it
Right.
works. They're not bad. They're not people who are greedy. Like capitalism, which is has such a bad connotation with so many people now. Um, for one, crony capitalism is a terrible thing. Like it does hurt people and it does cause a lot of problems, and we're not for that
Yeah.
either. But it's very hard to climb that hill sometimes. And so I
Yeah.
think what you did in your book by, starting with the reasons that people have for thinking UBI is a good thing, and then going into the concerns. And that's, you're opening a conversation. You're saying, okay, these
Thank
are
you.
acknowledged arguments that people have for it, and they're not bad necessarily that people want to help other people. That's not a bad thing. That's a good thing. And we want to incentivize that rather than making, two wrongs don't make a right. So stealing from me to help someone doesn't make a right. Let's figure out how to make things right without harming other people. So that justice seems to be non-existent when it comes to the haves often, and
Right.
and all focused on the have-nots, and we would like it to focus on everyone in society. So I've really enjoyed this book, and I'm sure I'll read it again. And like your book on
Oh, thank you.
capitalism that you did,
Oh yeah.
it's the same. It's like a manual to go and rethink and re-see the ideas when you are maybe in the midst of having a conversation with someone. So I really like that about it.
Thank you. I just, there's so much that you said that I can remark on. First of all, there is a treatment of crony capitalism in the book, and I do acknowledge that big business gets huge handouts from government, and I talk about that. Again, I know my audience. On the point of money, you said this idea that people, oh, wouldn't the world be better if we could just get rid of money? I think the misconception is you can get rid of money, but you can't get rid of scarcity. The only reason that money exists is because of scarcity. If 3D printing goes so far that you can just imagine a laptop and it materializes in front of you, well then, what use is there for laptops? For selling laptops. They're so abundant that everyone can have one. Now, the interesting thing is that's happened to tons of stuff. If you go to certain areas with thrift stores or charity stores, they're giving stuff away
Right.
because they can't get rid of it. They'll give books away.
VCRs and
Yeah, things they can't sell. Sometimes things become so abundant. When I was in India, if you're in a city and you go down an alley and you go to an internet cafe, they've all got all these PCs with Windows XP on them or something like that. Why? Because they can get them for nothing, almost nothing, because they've got no market value, at least here they don't. So that used to be a luxury, to have a PC with Windows XP in it. And now, in a poor country, people can go in for a little bit of money and get some internet access. So this is the process of capitalism enriching the poor, which the left do not understand. Money exists because of scarcity. Even if, I think, if everything was free, we would still be scarce in time. So there's still a chance that people would trade, because but we don't know what they trade, because time would still be a value. So maybe you have bands paying people to come and see them instead of people paying to see bands. I don't know. I've never thought of that before. That was just where my head went. But yeah, it's an interesting thing to consider, what would happen if we lived in a post-scarcity society where the costs of producing goods were so low, that goods were so abundant, that most things were free. I mean, what would we do? I think for a while people would get really unhealthy, and then that would become the major concern, and everyone would be, and you'd get a very, health conscious society, because they saw that what happened when people weren't taking care of their health. I don't know. It's interesting to consider, but right now it's just a philosophical discussion.
and
Go on.
I'm a big fan of Star Trek, and they
All
are
right.
in a post-scarcity society, right? And the thing I love about Star Trek is not that, because I often kind of chuckle that they're this post-scarcity society, and people are still going to be innovative, and they're still going to do all these great things that advance mankind just out of the goodness of their heart, and that really is a naive understanding of humans too. And I think that goes to the idea of capitalism, that you can get rid of money, but you can't get rid of greed. You can't get rid of people wanting to have things in life. And who am I to judge what one person wants over another? So I think these are all things that are worthy of having a conversation with our friends on the left, because um,
We have friends on the left.
we do,
What?
we
You have
do.
friends? Just kidding.
Yeah, but to have those conversations that bring back that reality that it doesn't make someone evil because they want an incentive to do that work. Like we see it in countries right now. I have a friend whose wife is a pharmacist, and they went and lived in New Zealand for 6 months for a charitable thing, because don't have very many pharmacists because of their socialized health care. They are trying to recruit people into these charity organizations to fill these positions, because it takes a lot of time and effort and money to go to pharmacy school. And when you have no incentive to do that, because you're not going to get paid very well for that sacrifice
Wow.
of your time, then people don't go into those fields. So I've dealt a little with the Canadian healthcare system, and that's a fun thing to talk about as well, which is very much more similar to the UK system. But it's all about those incentives for, I sacrifice my time. And yes, many doctors, I would say most doctors, most people who go into those professions, they're not only money motivated, they are motivated by their desire to help people as well. But I feel like it's not wrong for them to want compensation for that. That's a very
No,
sacrificial
no question.
lifestyle. They
Yeah,
sacrifice a lot of their
definitely.
time. So,
No question. Yeah, so um, it's true, and I talk a little bit. I mean, I don't need to go over the obvious arguments of that come to people's minds immediately, which is, well, if you're not paying people to work, they'll work less, and if you're and in order to pay for the UBI, you'll tax people more, so that's less incentive to work. That stuff's kind of very intuitive to most of your listeners. I tackle some more esoteric arguments in the work, and I think you'll find, if you at home download the book, I think you'll find those discussions interesting. I have a little piece on money. That I thought I might, since we're having a in-depth discussion on it, that I thought I might share with the audience,
sure.
since it'll be the first ever public performance. I wrote this when I was skiing. Oh, I sound so posh. Do you guys in America, do you use the word posh, or is that an exclusively a British thing?
We use it, but it is a British, like, we don't we it's kind of a joke word for us.
What do you guys say instead of posh?
Like fancy or cool, I guess.
Oh, that's
Or,
cool. You say cool instead of posh.
well, I don't know if it's instead of, but I would say fancy is probably more like
Ooh, fancy.
uppity.
Fancy.
I don't
I like
know.
I like oh yeah, uppity is a bit more,
Yeah.
it's a bit more so here yeah, so it's an, you have to excuse the vernacular. Someone's gonna call me a wigger.
Oh
Uh,
no.
I'm not gonna rap it, for God's sake. Don't make me self-conscious, Sherry. But you'll like the philosophical impulse of it. It goes like this. Now, money be the kind of thing that bring you down if you ain't got it around. If you can't appreciate it, you will surely come to hate it. If you treat it with respect, you might well hold on to it, but you'll soon run into debt if that's all that you expect. Some people just exude the money-making attitude. Dollars ain't their enemies, so they ain't never counting pennies. Others can't get on with riches, so they always in the ditches. Like the dude that can't get laid and say that all women be bitches. If you, I know, booyah, mic drop. If you change your state of mind, you'll find that money can be kind. But if you think that it is evil, it will always be deceitful. If you say that it don't matter, you'll be broke forever after. I wouldn't stick around for someone who said that about me.
That's
It's,
great. That's
yeah,
from your Make That Money song.
that's from a Make That Money song. And I think what I like about it is it's about it's about something that's very true, which is I think that a lot of people who don't have much money resent it, but for some people it's very easy. They don't even think about money because I can just make more. And certain people are driven that way, and I think that very much the kind of mindset you has. There you go. I've gone all that. I can't finish a sentence. We live in this society where I'm afraid to say that I sounded like an African American in case someone flags me up or I get flayed to death. Um, so
We'll blame it on you being Scottish.
yeah, I know. I just don't have any. We're culturally uncouth here. We don't know what isn't politically correct. We only just got bicycles like
Years
recently, yeah, a few years ago. It's amazing that I'm on the internet. Um, so I guess, but it speaks to our politics as well because there's this view that people are rich because other people are poor, or you have to be in some way nasty to climb the corporate ladder, and maybe a little bit of one-pointedness and prioritizing money will get you up the corporate ladder. But money's just like anything else that is of value. It's like if you say that it's not important, it's always people who are broke that go, oh, it doesn't matter about money, blah 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 blah. It's like you should have a good relationship to money because money represents like survival and quality of life. In fact, I've got a YouTube video on my self-help channel called Love and Money. Antony Sammeroff, Love and Money. Check it out. Um, it was originally called I Just Want to Fuck and Make Money because I thought that was more of a clickbaity title.
It's
And I
definitely
had
more clickbaity.
and I had a picture, that meme you have where someone's got like black sunglasses across their eyes and a joint coming out like Thug Life.
Thug
Thug
life,
Life is
yeah.
the name of the meme. I had that as the picture for it, which I really liked. But then what happened was, whenever you Googled Anthony Sammeroff, that was the first video that came up. And when I released my first book this year, Procrastination, Annihilation, my publicist was like, you maybe might want to change the name and the picture of that video if you want me to get you on the radio or anything like that, because that's coming up top. That's coming up really, really, really top.
Yeah.
So I had to change it. But that talks about how as far as nature is concerned, there's two things that are important, whether you like it or not: sex and money, because money is survival and sex is reproduction. And you should have a good relationship to both of those. And it's not because of those are like the most important things in life, I don't know, the respect of your peers, creativity, connection, all sorts of things, contribution. There's all sorts of things that are of higher value, maybe arguably, than sex and money. However, you build a house on a strong foundation from the ground up. So if you've got a good, why am I? It sounds like I'm some kind of like relationship. Well, that's all I was going to
Tony
say. But
Robbins or something.
relationships guru. But if you've got a good sex life and you're making enough money, that puts you in a good position to seek those higher goals. But if you've not got a good relationship to sex and money, then you're probably not going to climb that high because your fundamental needs
Right.
are unmet.
Yeah, and I think
I go beyond sex to relationships, to having good relationships.
right. I think that's a lot of what people often devalue those drives in humans, and none of us are going to get away from our biology. Like
Right.
those are basic human needs and desires, and that's why so many things are driven by those two things, sex and money,
Yeah,
because we can't get away from that. So let's figure out how
sure.
to incentivize what we need by what people want. So people want sex and money. Let's figure out how to build a whole
I
society
know I
around
do.
those two
I know.
things. Yeah.
Well, it's like, you hear the same similar things said about both. Oh, you shouldn't care too much about money, like blah blah blah. And people say, oh, you shouldn't worry if you're not in a relationship. You should just like, but you should just like, okay, somehow magically, the right person's going to appear. If you don't put any. Well, I guess some people say it happens when you least expect it, but you could be least expecting it for a very long time. And
It's easy to
these,
say. It's much more difficult to live through.
yeah, exactly. And people are always, sex is not a big deal to people who are getting it enough. It's a big deal to people
Right.
who aren't. But it's interesting because we're told constantly, oh, well, we live in this consumer society, and you're like driven to like chase money and blah blah blah, and that is true to an extent, but I would say you don't get that message nearly as much as you get the message you shouldn't care about money, or you shouldn't want too much money, or you're a bad person if you want too much money, or I think maybe it's different in America because you have a country which was founded based upon individual achievement and gumption, and yeah, you've got a culture. But at least what I hear is I'm much more shy about telling people I want to be successful or rich. Like I feel self-conscious telling people, oh, I'd love to be really rich. I would feel self-conscious about that.
Yeah, it's
I wouldn't feel self I wouldn't feel self-conscious about people saying, "Oh, I don't need that much money. I
right.
just need enough to get by." I wouldn't feel self-conscious about saying that at all because I think everyone would go, "Yeah, it's cool."
Yeah,
But if I say, "Yeah,
there's that assumption that you're somehow shallow if you want those things, and I think of Glaucon saying, it's better to look virtuous than to be virtuous, look good than to be
right,
good. And to most people, I think it is, that saying, well, I just, peace and love, man, and I'm all for those things, but there are realities that we have to deal with, and there's nothing wrong with saying, the I want to be successful. Who doesn't? Even if it's just a successful human being, like, we want to be successful. There's nothing wrong with wanting to be the best at something. It doesn't mean we will be, but there's nothing wrong with wanting that or striving for
success."
it.
Success is the sweetest thing in life. It doesn't matter what it is. You want to do it well, whether you're playing an instrument and you want to nail that piece, whatever you're doing, you want to do it successfully.
And what success is a relative term. Like, what I would view as success might be different, than what you would view as success, and they may have monetary values attached to that, or they may not. That doesn't make that wrong. That someone wants to say, "Hey, I want millions of dollars." I had a friend who is she's an account or she was she's retired now. She was an accounting professor for the University of Tennessee here in town, and she said to me one day, and she's a very conservative Republican person. She said, "I don't think anyone should be allowed to have more than $10 million."
A lot
And
of people believe that.
yeah, and I said to her, who gets to say? Who's going to determine? You going to go take it from them? Like, why is that? Why do you get to determine what their needs are? If they can make 10 million, more than 10 million bucks, good on them. Why is that, a problem? Because, like you said before, people believe there's only so many slices of the
Yeah,
pie, and
they
therefore,
think that people are poor because that person has got $10 million when that's not the case. In fact, I could get all economical about it and demonstrate that the opposite's the case. To the degree that you actually live in a free market, people who get rich, well, what are they going to do with that money? They have to invest it in something. They have to guess what are consumers going to want. If they guess successfully, they hold on to that money. If they make poor investments, they lose the money. So to the extent it is a free market, not a crony capitalist system, the resources are allocated to the people who make the best investments. In other words, the people who are the best at guessing what people are going to buy. So you want the people who are the best at guessing what people are going to buy to have the resources because they're making good decisions.
Right.
You don't want that money in the hands of people who wouldn't know how to invest them because when you invest in things that people don't want, that's a waste of resources.
Right. And
You know?
crony capitalism often, because politicians sell favors because they have favors to sell, and they're incentivized by their own desire for more. And so you see them protecting businesses doing bad things, like say Nestle. They were protected when the area they got the water from had been in a drought, and people were on a water restriction, and yet Nestle is trucking
Oh,
tons of
that's
water. That's
unbelievable.
all crony capitalism. That is
Sure.
a politician and a corporation, a marriage basically, and it protects those people. It makes the company, their incentive is to keep the politician happy, whereas if you remove that element, then their incentive is to actually make their consumers happy. So I think there's a lot to be said for that. That is a big part of a problem that we have in much of the world. So I just I know we're coming down our time here, and there's so many
Mhm.
things we could talk about.
Yes, and I certainly hope we've kept our consumers happy.
I hope so. Yeah. So why don't you, if there's any closing words that you would like to say about your book, I recommend it. I highly recommend it. Everything I've read that you've written, I've really enjoyed, and a lot of it has to do with style. It's
Mm.
not. You're very intelligent and you
Thank
understand
you.
the academic parts, but you're very good at communicating them in a way that laymen understand. So
Thank you.
it's very approachable. So I would recommend it to everyone, and for everyone to send to their friends on the
Yeah.
left.
Please grab it. beyourselfandloveit.com/UBI. You can also buy it on Amazon Kindle if you want. Um, but definitely, even if you do get it on your Kindle, download the free PDF and send it around. Spread the love. I can't do my work of if you don't give me a hand. So I think if you've got a lefty friend, this is a really great introduction to libertarianism. One of the best,
Yeah.
if I may be so bold to say so. I know because I used to be on the left, and it's kind of written to my younger self. So I say that without hubris because if someone had given this to me, sort of around Ron Paul era, 2007, 2008, that would have got me to this side a lot quicker.
Yeah. I think
So,
it's always, you catch more flies with honey, and there's the recognition that, you're not wrong for wanting people not to be poor. Like, that's not a wrong position to have. It's how we arrive at the solutions that really matters. So, thank you so much, Anthony. I appreciate it. It's always great to talk to you.
likewise.
Yeah, where are the other, like the Scottish Liberty podcast and any other .coms or anything you'd like to get?
Yeah, I mean, if you download the book or my other book, Procrastination Annihilation, from beyourselfandloveit.com/do it, all my essential links are in the book. And I think that's the best way to do it because if you want to get me in any way, form, shape, other transdimensional vehicle, I couldn't think of anything other than shape and form.
Yeah.
Uh,
Remote view you in the
you will,
evening.
all right. Okay. I better be careful what I do around here. Close down the meth lab.
Right.
Uh,
And that's
if you're going to remote me.
be
Be
yourself
yourself
and love
and
it.
loveit.com forward
Slash.
slash UBI. I think that'll do. That's the only link you need for
Okay.
today's show.
Okay.
Thank you so much,
Sure.
Sherry, for having me on the Sherry Voluntary Show.
Of course, anytime, my friend. I appreciate it. And you guys can catch me, of course, wherever you've already found me, YouTube, Stitcher, any of your podcasters. Tune in. You can say, hey, Alexa, play the Sherry Voluntary Show, and it will happen. It will play. So look for me around. This is a product of Little L Productions, and we have some other great programming like The Gold Standard with Alan Mosley and Sports Ball with Alan and Mike, which is Alan Mosley and Mike Maharry, and of course my other podcast, Postcards from Somalia with also Alan Mosley. He gets around as well.
He
So,
really does.
yeah. All right, guys. Peace. Till next time.
Peace.